For 15 years, scientists have benefited from data from classified U.S. satellites of all kinds of natural events, fireballs, events in the atmosphere. But not anymore. A recent U.S. military policy is now saying observations by government spacecraft of incoming bodies and fireballs are classified secret. They are not to be released. Bottom line, space rocks or anything else in the atmosphere are now classified.
What were the Japanese doing in lunar orbit anyway since 2007? Why did the Chinese go to lunar orbit? Why did the Indians go to lunar orbit? Why has Putin said to the Indians, hey, we want to take you and go with Russian cosmonauts to the moon? Why is suddenly everybody interested in the moon after they've not been interested in 40 years since we went and came back and been there, done that?
It means buckle your seatbelt, Dorothy, because Kansas is going bye-bye.
George, what if there's a war going on upstairs? Suppose we're involved in some kind of interplanetary war.
This isn't about sides. This is about confusion. This is about creating enemies where there aren't any. And man, the whole goddamn world's falling apart. Peace reigns, freedom reigns, democracy rules. How are we going to keep the military-industrial complex chugging forward without clear-cut, fucking, pit-faced, scum-sucking evil breathing down our neck? Threatening our very shores. Now my job is to make sure the other side keeps on fighting. Whatever side we're officially not on this year.
So there really was a purpose to that flyover in 1952. It was a message.
Oh, definitely. It was a show of force. Late in the 1990s, the Solar Warden program basically decided to break from the corporate-run programs, and so the U.S. military decided that they no longer trusted that the corporations were acting in the best interests of the United States. This is one of the things that the intelligence community is very good at doing, is hiding a deep black program beneath a black program.
They don't filter it. They just give it to the scientists.
Okay. Here you go.
The scientists will then figure out, wait a minute, this isn't bowlines, fireballs, asteroids, moths, hiccups. Oh, my God, these are spaceships. And they don't want the general scientific community, which had incredible credibility, of course, if it ever came out with this, to have the source data to come to this conclusion.
And then in the late 1990s, the U.S. military made a decisive break. And in particular, the Solar Warden space program decided to make a complete break with the corporate-run space program that had been established. And this break became more serious over the decade to eventually it came into kind of like armed confrontation. And as the name suggests, the people involved in that program believe themselves to be the kind of protectors of the solar system. So they kind of like, they intercept and interdict any incoming spacecraft, any extraterrestrial civilization that comes into our solar system, and basically checks in on them and says, who are you? Why are you here? What are your plans, and so forth? Because we need to keep in mind that these space programs began to operationalize in the 1970s, 1980s. They began to establish presences on the moon, on Mars. That they were able to develop deep space capacities. So by the 1980s, Solar Warden was operational throughout the solar system.
And what we're hearing is that on Earth there has been a fierce battle between dispossessed elements from the Pentagon that got kicked out by the cabal and ended up forming an alliance outside the governmental structure. And there's a lot of them.
A, there's a war going on, B, it's heating up, and C, there's a whole bunch of really unexpected stuff that is about to happen, and both sides are trying to control it as best they can.
Are the breakaways the good guys?
No, just the opposite. They're the Nazis.
The opposite. Oh, okay. Yeah. The breakaways are the Nazis.
You know, Jim, what's really amazing, if you really get this HD physics down right, you can conquer the human lifespan problem. Which means we could actually be dealing with some of the original Nazis from World War II.
The military's known about the alien question for the better part of 70 years, and they first saw their glimpse of what was going on as early as 1909 in the American Southwest. Now, Army cavalry evidently were chasing some bandits, and they entered this cave. They were holed up in a cave, and what they found in there was flying discs and little gray guys and all kinds of weird things, and they didn't know how to explain that, and they wrote them down as best they could, and it's been in secret archives ever since. Since late August of 1979, our military, the Russian military, basically the militaries of the world, have been in constant conflict with the outer space alien. The small gray, the large gray, the reptilians, the whole thing. The alien agenda is the complete takeover of this planet, the killing off of 5, 6 to 7/8 of the world's population by the year 2029. There was the Greada 1954 treaty where Eisenhower signed a pact with the known alien species of the time. There were 3 at the time. And said that we're going to deal in high technology, but you can take a few head of cattle and a few human beings and you can experiment on them. It's unthinkable. It's stuff straight out of the Nazi death camps. The New World Order, the alien agenda is one and the same. It's world takeover and the decimation of the population of this planet. Now, I'm going to tell you something a little bit different about the alien species. The bad news ones, there are 9 races of alien populations. To look at a human being as a bag of food. They're not cannibals. They don't eat the flesh and the bones and all that kind of stuff. They use the glandular secretions of animals and human beings as a mixture of the vitamins for their food. They get high off of our adrenal gland substances called adrenochrome. It's something like cocaine to them.
It was known to him for sure that Jimmy Carter did receive a briefing on the matter of UFO/ET in June of 1977. Now, this man did not know exactly what was told to President Carter. This is early on in the Jimmy Carter administration. He had just been inaugurated a few months earlier. But what he did know, he said, was that at the conclusion of that meeting, President Carter was seen at his desk, elbows on the desk, head in his hands, and he was either sobbing or nearly sobbing. Something deeply upset President Carter. What was that something? I speculated with this gentleman. I said, well, can we assume that he was told this was a very serious matter? He said, yes. I said, can we assume that he might have been told he doesn't really have a whole lot of operational control over this matter? He said, absolutely yes.
Program, the Nazification of America, which I wrote about in The Rise of the Fourth Reich. This really goes way back there. Let me give you this quote from Lyndon Johnson. Okay, he was as Senator Lyndon Johnson speaking to the Senate Democratic Caucus. He says, quote, "Control of space means control of the world. From space, the masters of infinity would have the power to control the Earth's weather, to cause drought and flood, to change the tides and raise the level of the sea, to divert the Gulf Stream and change the climate to frigid. This is the ultimate position, the position of total control over the Earth that lies somewhere in outer space," end quote. And he said that in 1958. Now, what do you suppose he meant by the masters of infinity?
Because he was on the in crowd. He knew what. Remember, you asked me which politicians knew.
Yeah, he's one of them.
Johnson definitely knew.
Yeah,
and that's why he was so interested. because he knew it was the determination of human history on Earth. What was coming, what was being planned. And remember how Kennedy tried to give the results of this extraordinary exploration of the moon in person, Apollo. He tried to give it to the Russians, to the Soviets, so we'd do it together.
That's right.
And in Dark Mission, I argue with Mike Barra, that was the reason he got killed. It was the final straw. And there's this wink, the incredible photograph of the wink between him on Air Force One after he's taken the oath and the head of the Republican committee in the Congress that oversaw NASA's funding. Mm-hmm. And they're winking to each other.
Yep. Yeah,
well, Kennedy, you can't get any more, you can't get clearer than that. Now, of course, we've got the mainstream beginning to listen, and I've not had a chance to hear them. Have you, Jim, Jackie's tapes where she talks about Lyndon Johnson as the man who killed her husband?
Well, yeah, it's this is the limited hangout. They're going to keep dribbling this out until about another 10 or 20 years. Everybody's
we
just
don't
going
have
to say,
10 or 20 years.
No, that's
Jim,
true.
We don't have 10 or 20.
That's
I'm
true.
fascinated because this is the first official break in the wall that Johnson was a do-gooder, good old boy from South Texas who just had a rough way for doing really cool things. Do you think people are going to want to really come face-to-face with the idea that there's a World War III and it's us against the Nazis again? No. So they have a great interest in keeping it secret.
You have different factions here. You have different factions in terms of the U.S. military-industrial elite. Yes. You have the secret societies. And then you have the U.S. military, the rank-and-file admirals and generals that run the Navy, that run the Air Force. And these people... while they cooperate in some areas, they have very different interests, long-term interests in other areas. And so that's when you had all the military whistleblowers starting to come forward. That's why Stephen Greer in the late 1990s had hundreds, we're talking hundreds of military whistleblowers coming forward, revealing to him what was going on, because the military green-lighted their people to come forward and reveal the truth.
I have evidence that we've been under surveillance by some good guys from at least the late 1800s. And that those good guys, a la Gene Roddenberry in Star Trek and the Prime Directive,
they've been conditioning us.
They've not been able to directly intervene.
Well, these are the benevolent aliens, and they've been here helping us. In fact, I have a picture. Let me reach for it here. I have a picture of one of the aliens been working for the United States Pentagon for the last 58 years. His name is Val Valiant Thor. He's right here.
Slightly over towards the middle is a man. It looks like he has graying hair. It's because of the black and white. It's not gray. It's a very strange individual by the name of Don Thor. He's holding a sheaf of papers in his hand, as you may note. He was a civilian, and we do not know all of his history, except it is alleged that he, as his brother Val, were from Venus. And why he had an interest in this experiment, we do not know to this day.
The Soviet forces, the foreign forces, all of us have an alien war going on. The Red Chinese right now are getting it in full brunt. The Russians are shooting down per province. There are about 9 provinces in their motherland. They're shooting down at the rate of 50 of these saucers per month in ships. They're heaping piles of them in outer Mongolia, mountains of them. They just tow them out there and let them sit out there.